Flames of dark sorcery cascaded through the doomed city, summoned by a heretic's twisted litany. Suddenly, the unnatural fire sputtered and died. A suffocating emptiness crushed his mind, forcing the arrogant sorcerer to his knees as an absolute void swallowed his desperate gasps. From the deepest shadows of the ruined cathedral, a lone warrior, clad in burnished copper armor, glided forward without a single sound. Her executioner greatblade caught the dying light, a silent instrument of wrath, descending to end his pathetic existence in pure oblivion. Hearken to my words, my faithful acolytes, for I am but your most humble servant, an archivist bound to the deepest vaults. The flickering candlelight in this suffocating scriptorium barely pushes back the encroaching dark as I unseal these ancient forbidden vellum records. We speak of a phantom brotherhood, or rather a sisterhood, existing strictly on the very fringes of the Emperor's divine illumination. They are the Anathema Psykana, the silent sisterhood, the relentless left hand of our glorious master, born to extinguish the unnatural. To comprehend their existence is to gaze directly into an abyss devoid of all spiritual light. They carry the pariah gene, a biological anomaly making them untouchable blanks in the warp, entities possessing absolutely no soul within the chaotic sea of souls, while the glorious Adeptus Astartes conquer with roaring bolters and roaring chains wards. These solemn maidens wage a fundamentally different war. Their battleground is the unseen realm, their quarry the dangerous psychers who threaten to tear reality asunder with their untrained, volatile minds. Every single initiate of this terrifying order is bound by the ultimate vow of tranquility. They never speak, communicating only through the rapid, rhythmic strikes of thought mark, their armored fingers tapping silent commands against heavy ceramite and gleaming copper in the gloom. Their fortresses are grand architectural marvels, yet utterly devoid of the booming pipe organs or echoing choirs found in standard cathedrals. Instead, an oppressive, unnatural silence permeates the immense halls, a heavy atmosphere that instinctively repulses any normal human who dares enter. These copper-clad warriors have served since the glorious dawn of the Imperium, standing alongside the greatest heroes during the darkest hours. They are absolute loyalty made manifest, asking for zero recognition, expecting no magnificent parades, and receiving absolutely no glory in return. Imagine the colossal black ships, those ominous vessels traversing the treacherous warp currents to harvest the psychic tithe. Aboard these floating dungeons, the oppressive presence of the Silent Sisters maintains absolute order, suppressing the maddening whispers of the Immaterium with their very existence. Their armory is a testament to focused, merciless efficiency, maintaining exquisite weapons forged by long-forgotten artisans. The Executioner Greatblade is their signature instrument, a perfectly balanced masterwork capable of severing a corrupted psyker's head before they can manifest a single damning spell. When a Sister of Silence enters a battlefield, the fundamental laws of reality seem to eagerly reassert themselves. The chaotic energies of the warp instinctively recoil from their aura, dissolving into nothingness, like morning mist burning away beneath a harsh, unforgiving sun. They are the ultimate shield against the demonic incursions that constantly threaten our vulnerable worlds. Where a conventional regiment might break against the maddening horrors of the warp, these voiceless sentinels advance with chilling precision, their faces hidden behind heavy rebreather masks. To stand near them is to experience a profound existential dread, a spiritual vacuum that drains hope and warmth. Ordinary mortals instinctively flinch, their subconscious minds screaming in primal terror at the presence of an entity entirely disconnected from the great emotional spectrum. Yet, this instinctual revulsion is the ultimate tragedy of their sacred, unending duty to mankind. They dedicate their entire existence to protecting a humanity that inherently despises them, a billion ungrateful souls who shudder in disgust whenever a copper-armored sentinel silently passes. I have studied ancient Pict captures, showing their deployment during the apocalyptic compliance of forgotten star systems. Whole cabals of rogue sorcerers capable of leveling entire hive cities found their immense power instantly neutralized, reduced to weeping, powerless wretches by the Anathema Psykana. Their discipline is absolute, their martial prowess rivaling the most elite guard regiments or even the transhuman warriors. They fight in perfectly synchronized formations, their silent coordination far more effective than any shouted command, a deadly ballet of flashing blades and lethal intent. Consider the sheer willpower required to navigate the universe utterly alone, severed from the ambient psychic background. They hear no echoes of joy, sense no ripples of sorrow in the warp. They exist entirely within an impenetrable void of their own tragic making. The golden throne of Holy Terra itself relies entirely upon their grim, unending harvest of rogue psychers. Without the vital psychic sustenance gathered and guarded by these untouchable hunters, the Emperor's guiding light would extinguish, plunging the entire galaxy into permanent darkness. Every single day, countless rogue psychers are hunted down, restrained in heavy iron chains, and dragged across lead-lined grates. The sisters show zero hesitation, zero pity, entirely insulated against the begging, the screaming, and the mind-rending curses hurled at them. They are the silent gears maintaining the vast, grinding machinery of the brutal Imperium of man. While historians meticulously record the thunderous deeds of armored giants, the crucial sacrifices of the Anathema Psykana remain deliberately obscured, buried deep within classified, heavily redacted archives. I trace my ink-stained fingers over these crumbling vellum pages, marveling at the sheer, unyielding stoicism they display. They are the ultimate embodiment of grim duty, enduring absolute isolation to guarantee the continued survival of a species teetering on the edge. Let us reflect upon the intricate designs of their burnished armor, glowing softly in the dim light. It is an aesthetic contradiction, a beautiful shell housing a terrifying, soul-draining emptiness, a perfect metaphor for the necessary evils required to sustain us. Their very title, the Oblivion Knights, accurately reflects the final destination they bring to the enemies of truth. They are not merely executioners. They are the swift, silent instruments of universal cancellation, erasing dangerous anomalies from the physical and spiritual realms entirely. Their training regimens are shrouded in absolute secrecy, conducted within the unapproachable fastnesses of the Somus Citadel. It is whispered that initiates must endure physical and psychological trials that would permanently break the mind of a lesser soul, emerging, forged in unbreakable silence. As I delve deeper into these encrypted files, I sense a profound, unspoken sorrow lingering beneath the facts. These women, completely bereft of the spiritual connection shared by all living things, walk a path so cold and desolate that my own heart physically aches. Yet their resolve never wavers. Their silent vigils remain unbroken throughout the passing of violent millennia. They continue to patrol the shadowed corridors of the black ships, their executioner great blades constantly drawn, ever watchful for the slightest fluctuation in the volatile warp currents. We owe them a debt that can absolutely never be repaid, nor even properly acknowledged in the open. They are the unsung saviors, the terrifying guardians standing resolute between fragile humanity and the hungry, slavering deities of the chaotic Immaterium seeking our ruin. However, as I translate the final runes on this particular scroll, a chilling realization slowly dawns upon me. A subtle shift in the cosmic balance is occurring, a disturbance that even their immense, soul-draining auras might eventually struggle to contain in the future. Shadows are lengthening rapidly across the galaxy, and whispers of an unprecedented psychic awakening are echoing in the void. A storm is gathering, my acolytes, a terrible tempest that will truly test the breaking point of the silent sisterhood and their unyielding vows. The gathering tempest finally struck our reality with the sudden, jarring violence of a collapsing star. Deep within the heavily armored hull of the grand black ship, Eternus Solitude, warning klaxons began screaming their mechanical terror into the stifling, claustrophobic corridors. Blinking, strobe lights bathed the vast iron grates in an unforgiving, pulsating red emergency glow. The ancient Geller field generators groaned under unprecedented strain, their blessed adamantium housings shuddering violently as unseen cosmic horrors clawed frantically at the shimmering protective barrier. I have read the fragmented sensor logs detailing the absolute pandemonium of that doomed voyage. Cogitator arrays sparked and violently short-circuited, spewing foul-smelling smoke into the pressurized atmosphere, while desperate tech priests frantically chanted litanies of appeasement to the failing machine spirits. Within the deepest containment levels, the suppression wards began to rapidly destabilize and fracture. The captured rogue psychers, previously reduced to whimpering husks by the Anathema Psykana, suddenly felt the oppressive null fields momentarily weaken, replaced by empowering, highly chaotic energy surges. Unnatural levitation occurred as localized gravity anomalies heavily distorted the immediate physical environment of the lower decks. Heavy iron chains rattled violently, scraping against lead-lined bulkheads as the possessed prisoners aggressively thrashed, their sunken eyes igniting with a sickening, unnatural purple illumination. A deafening chorus of unnatural whispers flooded the ship's Vox network, overriding all standard astropathic communication protocols. It was the malicious chatter of the warp, a concentrated psychic onslaught designed to completely shatter the fragile sanity of every mortal naval rating aboard. Yet, in the very heart of this unfolding nightmare, the silent sisterhood remained entirely unbothered. Within their sanctified deployment chambers, the Oblivion Knights stood in perfect, terrifying formation, an unbreakable island of absolute, chilling tranquility amidst the rapidly rising tide of utter madness. Pay close attention, my acolytes, to the meticulous systemic realism of their grim physical preparation. There was absolutely no shouted encouragement, only the rhythmic, metallic clacking of armored gauntlets executing rapid thought-mark commands, organizing defensive perimeters with a cold, calculating, and ruthless efficiency. Servitors trundled slowly through the tight ranks, dispensing copious amounts of blessed, sacred oils upon heavy ceramite plating. The pungent, heavy scent of burning myrrh heavily masked the sharp ozone tang of discharging plasma conduits, consecrating the silent sisters for the righteous cleansing ahead. Each dedicated warrior methodically checked the complex locking mechanisms of her specialized, heavily customized Vratin armor. You could hear the satisfying metallic clunk of heavy bolter magazines snapping perfectly into well-maintained receivers, chambering mass reactive rounds specifically inscribed with the Emperor's divine wards. Their magnificent executioner great blades were simultaneously drawn in perfect unison, a terrifying metallic hiss echoing deep in the gloom. The massive power weapons hummed brilliantly to life, disruptive power fields crackling eagerly with blue energy, patiently awaiting the glorious moment of total severance. Suddenly, the primary blast doors of containment block Ungamma violently imploded inward with tremendous force. A devastating shockwave of pure psychic power tore through the corridor, bending adamantium support struts like fragile twigs and pulverizing several unfortunate enforcer servitors into fine, drifting metallic dust. From the swirling, violently ash-choked ruins emerged the twisted, horrific forms of the liberated captives. They were no longer human, but tragic, corrupted vessels for malicious warp entities, their physical bodies mutating with sickening speed as dark, inky fluids began weeping from their pores. The lead abomination, a former noble-sanctioned psyker, hovered unnaturally above the ruined, scorched decking. Crackling arcs of destructive warp lightning danced erratically across his severely distended limbs, illuminating his twisted features, which were now permanently frozen in a rictus grin of unadulterated chaotic malice. He raised a violently trembling hand, preparing to unleash a devastating torrent of warp fire to consume the defenders. He chanted rapidly in a forbidden tongue, drawing immense corruptive power from the Immaterium to completely incinerate the heavily armored sentinels standing resolutely in his path. But his dark, blasphemous invocation was abruptly and brutally severed before it could even fully manifest. The lead Oblivion Knight stepped confidently forward, her terrifying null aura projecting outward like an invisible, suffocating tidal wave of absolute nothingness, violently slamming into the gathering chaotic storm. The chaotic fire sputtered uselessly in the air, instantly reduced to harmless, rapidly cooling ash upon the grated floor. The rogue psyker's arrogant grin vanished instantly, replaced by an expression of pure primal terror, as he suddenly realized his deep connection to the warp was entirely gone. He collapsed heavily to the cold iron floor, desperately gasping for breath, as the oppressive weight of the pariah gene crushed his mind. He was completely powerless, an empty, pathetic vessel abandoned by his dark patrons, forced to confront the terrifying reality of his absolute doom. The stoic Sister of Silence closed the physical distance with terrifying, predatory grace, her immense great blade raised high. There was zero hesitation, absolutely no malice, merely the cold, mechanical application of necessary force as the loudly humming blade descended in a flawless, perfectly executed downward arc. The heavy blade cleanly bisected the corrupted physical form, entirely silencing the chaotic manifestation in a single, brutal stroke. There was absolutely no grotesque display, only a blinding flash of blue energy and the distinct acrid smell of ozone as the unholy entity was successfully expunged. All around them, the violent micro-engagements rapidly multiplied as more possessed prisoners flooded the narrow, darkened corridors. The Sisters of Silence met them with disciplined, overlapping fields of devastating bolter fire. the mass reactive rounds detonating with thunderous roars, reducing the aggressive advance into mere ash. It was a terrifying masterclass in controlled, systematic eradication, completely devoid of any unnecessary passion or rage. They moved seamlessly like perfectly calibrated cogs within a vast machine, executing precise tactical maneuvers to systematically cleanse the corrupted sectors, one heavily fortified corridor at a time. A hulking, unnatural warp beast, a horrific amalgamation of twisting shadows and gnashing spectral teeth, lunged violently from an overhead ventilation shaft. It desperately sought to tear the squad leader apart, its shadowy, shifting claws reaching blindly for the gleaming copper throat guard of the impassive warrior. Before the screaming abomination could even make physical contact, the absolute null field violently disrupted its highly unstable molecular cohesion. The beast shrieked silently, its shadowy form unraveling instantly into dark, oily smoke as it collided disastrously with the harsh reality enforced by the sisters' mere proximity. Another armored sister smoothly sidestepped a desperate, unseen telekinetic thrust that violently crumpled the heavy bulkhead directly behind her. She quickly retaliated with a blindingly fast upward slash, her heavy executioner great blade effortlessly separating the offending psyker from his foul existence, delivering the Emperor's peace without a sound. The atmospheric air grew incredibly thick, with the distinct smell of discharged power cells and burning promethium. Small, localized chemical fires flickered wildly across the damaged command consoles, casting long, highly erratic shadows across the gleaming copper armor of the relentlessly advancing Anathema Psykana strike force. They marched steadily forward in a tightly locked, impenetrable phalanx, a solid wall of uncompromising reality, aggressively pushing back the impossible. Every synchronized step was a deliberate, highly calculated insult to the chaotic forces desperately attempting to claim the massive black ship as their own twisted prize. Yet, despite their ruthless efficiency, the sheer volume of the chaotic psychic breach continued to expand at an alarming rate. The localized, violent warp storm surrounding the vessel intensified greatly, tearing larger reality rifts into the ship's ancient infrastructure, allowing even more malevolent entities to slip past. The oppressive shadows within the main central hangar bay began to rapidly coalesce into towering, truly monstrous shapes. The ambient temperature plummeted dramatically, unnatural frost rapidly forming on the polished ceramite of the defending sisters, as a presence of immense, unfathomable dark power fully manifested itself before them. The thick deck plates groaned and buckled under the impossible crushing weight of a fully summoned greater demon of the warp. It let out a reality-shattering, deafening roar, a terrifying sound of such pure, unadulterated hatred that the grand battle for the Eternus Solitude was now officially underway. The colossal manifestation of chaos lunged forward, its massive, shadowy form eclipsing the flickering emergency luminal panels entirely. It swung a spectral weapon forged from concentrated malice, attempting to completely crush the impenetrable defensive phalanx established by the resolute Sisters of Silence. However, the combined null aura of the Anathema Psykana reacted violently against the demonic intrusion, creating a blinding shockwave of pure reality. The spectral weapon instantly shattered into countless harmless sparks, dissipating uselessly against the invisible, suffocating barrier of absolute emptiness they continuously projected. The greater demon recoiled sharply, its monstrous features twisting in profound agony as the oppressive pariah gene actively disrupted its physical anchor. Dark, viscous tar began to weep profusely from its fractured spectral plating, pooling darkly upon the ruined, violently scarred iron deck below. Without a single vocalized command, the copper-clad warriors immediately advanced, their executioner great blades raised in perfect, terrifying synchronization. They struck with the cold, mechanical precision of a ticking chronometer, each sweeping blow systematically dismantling the defensive wards of the towering, deeply corrupted abomination. Disruptive energy fields crackled furiously along their heavy blades, severing the intricate chaotic tethers binding the entity to our material plane. The demon roared its defiance, unleashing localized gravity distortions that violently hurled heavy cargo crates across the expansive, heavily damaged hangar bay. Several allied naval armsmen, desperately attempting to provide supporting lasgun fire, were caught directly in the devastating kinetic blast. They were forcefully thrown against the unforgiving lead-lined bulkheads, their fragile mortal forms entirely ruined, yet they held their standard-issue weapons with unyielding pride. These brave men, completely untouched by the corrupting whispers of the Immaterium thanks to the sisters' proximity, embraced the Emperor's peace with exceptional honor. Their soulless eyes stared vacantly toward the vaulted ceiling, perfectly content in their glorious sacrifice for the Golden Throne. The Oblivion Knights paid zero heed to the fallen, their immense focus completely locked onto the monumental task of absolute eradication. They expertly navigated the treacherous, violently shifting debris field, their Vertine armor deflecting secondary kinetic impacts with spectacular showers of brilliant, blinding sparks. The lead warrior, a true master of the silent arts, vaulted effortlessly over a shattered cargo container to close the final distance. She drove her crackling great blade directly into the demon's central mass, delivering a catastrophic surge of disruptive, highly concentrated anti-psychic energy inward. The massive warp entity shuddered violently, its dark form flickering erratically like a failing Pict cast trapped in a severe geomagnetic storm. It desperately attempted to lash out one final time, but the absolute null field had already critically compromised its unnatural structural integrity entirely. With a brilliant, blinding flash of pure azure light, the greater demon was violently expunged from the physical records of existence. It collapsed entirely into a massive pile of rapidly cooling gray ash, thoroughly silenced by the unwavering resolve of the blank, copper-clad sentinels. Observe closely, my acolytes, the sheer, unrelenting brutality of this specific methodology. It is a warfare entirely devoid of glorious, celebrated triumph. It is the grim, systematic sanitization of reality itself, a cold equation where chaotic anomalies are ruthlessly subtracted to maintain strict systemic balance. The chaotic forces, momentarily stunned by the sudden, absolute destruction of their primary anchor, immediately faltered in their aggressive, uncoordinated advance. The oppressive silence of the sisters pressed outward like a crushing physical weight, forcing the remaining lesser demons back into the dark, shadowed corners. The coordinated counteroffensive resumed instantly, a relentless march of gleaming copper and roaring bolter fire echoing through the grand, ruined hall. Mass reactive shells found their marks with terrifying accuracy, rapidly cleansing the corrupted corridors of the twisted, shrieking remnants of the catastrophic warp breach. A squad of traitorous psychers, completely maddened by the catastrophic failure of their ritual, desperately attempted to form a defensive psychic barrier. They channeled forbidden energies, their eyes burning with unnatural witch light, seeking to stall the inexorable, terrifying advance of the Anathema Psykana vanguard. But their pathetic sorcery was utterly meaningless against the approaching void, their arcane shields shattering like fragile glass beneath a heavy hammer. The sisters stepped confidently through the dissipating magical remnants, their executioner great blades rising and falling in a silent, beautiful, yet terrifying rhythm of destruction. The corrupted witches were systematically silenced, their dangerous minds permanently disconnected from the raging sea of souls without a single uttered word. Only the heavy, metallic thud of their ruined bodies striking the deck plates marked their ultimate, inevitable failure against the Emperor's absolute justice. Viscous, dark fluids sprayed erratically from severed cybernetic conduits, painting the immaculate copper armor of the victors with the grim grime of conflict. Yet, their solemn expressions remained completely hidden beneath heavy rebreather masks, entirely insulated from the horrific, grim reality they actively, methodically created. The battle for the hangar bay raged fiercely, transforming into a chaotic, desperate struggle for every single inch of the sacred vessel. The Sisters of Silence fought with an eerie, mechanical grace, their movements a perfect, deadly dance carefully choreographed over centuries of unending, silent warfare. They seamlessly rotated their vanguard positions, ensuring fresh warriors constantly engaged the rapidly manifesting horrors spilling from the localized reality tears. Heavy bolters roared with righteous fury, successfully keeping the overwhelming green tide of minor warp spawn at a manageable, highly controlled, and heavily suppressed distance. Every fallen enemy was instantly rendered into a heap of smoldering, harmless ruin, their chaotic essence banished entirely to the unforgiving void. The physical environment was rapidly decaying, heavily scarred by the intense heat of plasma discharge and the highly corrosive touch of foul, unnatural energies. An unfortunate tech priest, his defensive augmetics severely damaged, was cornered by a pack of spectral hounds composed entirely of jagged, shifting shadows. He chanted a final, desperate Binharic prayer, fully prepared to be violently subsumed by the encroaching, terrifying darkness of the hostile warp environment. Suddenly, a gleaming executioner greatblade cleanly intercepted the lead hound, violently disrupting its unstable form with a loud, aggressive crackle of blue energy. A lone Oblivion Knight stepped firmly between the battered priest and the remaining pack, projecting her terrifying aura of absolute, crushing, and soulless nothingness. The spectral hounds whimpered silently, their unstable forms rapidly dissolving into dark, oily mist as they desperately attempted to flee the null zone. The tech priest bowed his heavily augmented head in silent, profound gratitude, acknowledging the terrifying savior who had effectively secured his continued mechanical functionality. These quiet, entirely unnoticed acts of absolute salvation are precisely what makes the Anathema Psykana the most tragic figures in our grand history. They constantly save a fragile humanity that instinctively recoils from their very presence, demanding zero praise or acknowledgement for their eternal, grueling, unrecorded sacrifices. The grand battle slowly shifted from the expansive hangar bay into the claustrophobic winding maintenance corridors deep within the massive ship's bowels. Here, the intense fighting became incredibly brutal and highly intimate, a grim contest of raw physical endurance against the unending, unnatural stamina of raw chaos. Sparks showered brightly from overhead luminal strips as heavy ceramite scraped violently against the confined, lead-lined walls of the narrow passageways. The air grew oppressively thick, completely choked with the harsh, metallic scent of vaporized armor plates and the heavily pungent stench of actively burning myrrh. A monstrous, multi-limbed terror entirely composed of grafted cybernetics and dark magic attempted to forcefully breach the primary Engineerium control sanctum. It tore through the heavy defensive barricades with ease, its multiple optical sensors blazing with a sickly, corrupted yellow light deep in the suffocating gloom. The defending sisters quickly formed an impenetrable shield wall, their heavy, locking boots magnetically anchoring firmly to the vibrating deck plates below. They absorbed the tremendous kinetic impact of the charging beast, their armor groaning heavily under the extreme, punishing pressure of the sustained, highly aggressive assault. Despite the overwhelming physical force arrayed against them, their absolute faith in the Golden Throne remained entirely unbroken, acting as the ultimate anchor. This unwavering devotion formed an impenetrable spiritual fortress within their minds, completely protecting their sanity from the heavily corrupting influence constantly radiating from the beast. The relentless assault upon the Engineerium finally faltered, completely broken against the immovable copper-clad bulwark of the Silent Sisterhood. The monstrous cybernetic abomination collapsed into a ruined heap of rapidly cooling slag, its dark, unnatural energies entirely neutralized by the suffocating void of the untouchables. Silence slowly reclaimed the shattered corridors of the Eternus solitude, but it was a heavy, suffocating quiet, born of absolute devastation. The immediate atmosphere thickened dangerously, completely choked by swirling clouds of gray ash and the highly toxic, lingering residue of aggressively discharged plasma and ozone. The grand, Gothic architecture of the ancient black ship lay in absolute ruin, heavily scarred by the intense, merciless conflict. Shattered lumens flickered weakly, casting long, erratic shadows across the buckled deck plates and the violently twisted adamantium support struts that groaned under immense, invisible pressures. Allied naval ratings and battered tech priests began to cautiously emerge from their fortified defensive positions, their faces pale and drawn. They stared in profound, instinctual terror at the towering, copper-armored sentinels standing perfectly still amidst the cooling debris, their presence radiating a cold, unnatural dread. The Sisters of Silence remained entirely motionless, their heavy executioner great blades resting point down upon the heavily scarred deck plates. Their meticulously maintained Vratine armor was now severely scorched and heavily dented, bearing the permanent physical scars of their grueling, uncompromising confrontation with the chaotic Immaterium. Yet, the physical damage was completely negligible compared to the immense, invisible burdens they constantly carried within their soulless shells. To actively project such a massive, reality-enforcing null aura requires a level of supreme mental endurance that would instantly shatter the fragile sanity of any normal human. I ask you to carefully contemplate the sheer, overwhelming exhaustion that must surely accompany such a bleak, spiritually isolated existence. They are permanent exiles residing within the material universe, constantly surrounded by a vibrant sea of souls that they can absolutely never, ever touch or truly comprehend. The intense combat had officially concluded, but the grimdark reality of their endless, tragic crusade offered absolutely no moment of respite. They merely transitioned from the active, violent application of force to the silent, enduring vigil against the ever-present, creeping shadows that constantly threatened our fragile reality. Suddenly, a deeply unsettling, highly illogical phenomenon began to manifest within the central nave of the ruined containment block. The localized reality, supposedly stabilized by the concentrated pariah field, began to strangely warp and ripple, completely defying all known systemic laws of physical and spiritual mechanics. A strange, pale luminescence began to slowly bleed through the microscopic fractures in the heavily reinforced, lead-lined bulkheads. It was not the chaotic, sickening purple of warp fire, but a cold, sterile white light that carried no warmth, only a profound, chilling sense of ancient, forgotten sorrow. The heavy, ambient temperature, already quite low, plummeted to absolute freezing, causing thick layers of unnatural rime to coat everything. Even the mighty Sisters of Silence seemed to hesitate for a fraction of a second, their perfectly synchronized movements momentarily disrupted by the bizarre, entirely unprecedented environmental shift. From the very center of the sterile, glowing anomaly, a massive, seemingly ancient mechanical relic began to slowly assemble itself. It was a chaotic amalgamation of floating, interlocking metallic rings, heavily inscribed with forgotten ciphers that absolutely defied the most rigorous analytical attempts of the surviving tech priests. The relic hovered silently in the freezing air, projecting an aura of intense, crushing gravity that pulled loose debris toward it. It completely ignored the powerful null fields projected by the Oblivion Knights, operating on a bizarre frequency entirely separate from the standard fluctuations of the chaotic Immaterium. This was a terrifying, stark reminder of the immense, incomprehensible mysteries that still lurk within the darkest, unexplored corners of existence. The Imperium of man, in all its vast bureaucratic glory, remains entirely ignorant of forces far older and vastly more complex than simple demonic incursions or heresy. The lead Oblivion Knight stepped cautiously toward the rotating anomaly, her heavy executioner great blade held in a high defensive guard position. She rapidly executed a complex series of thought-mark commands, instructing her highly disciplined squad to maintain a strict perimeter, while she investigated the bizarre, illogical manifestation further. As she approached the floating, metallic rings, the sterile white light intensified greatly, reflecting blindingly off her scratched copper armor. The absolute silence of the room was suddenly broken by a low, mechanical humming, a sound that seemed to originate directly within the minds of the horrified onlookers. It was not a chaotic whisper attempting to corrupt, but a purely digital, soulless transmission, broadcasting an ancient, highly encrypted warning. The tech priests immediately collapsed to their knees in severe agony, their heavily augmented audio receptors completely overloaded by the sheer, unadulterated density of the archaic data stream. Even the Sister of Silence, protected by her powerful pariah gene, was visibly affected by the sheer physical force of the signal. She was forced to take a heavy, braced step backward, her armored boots grinding harshly against the frozen deck as she actively resisted the overwhelming illogical phenomenon. The anomaly clearly demonstrated that there are ancient, terrible powers within the galaxy that are entirely immune to their unique gifts. The grim realization settled heavily upon the surviving crew. Their ultimate shield, the Anathema Psykana, was not an absolute, flawless defense against every single terror the universe harbored. This profound revelation struck at the very core of Imperial dogma, introducing a terrifying element of uncontrollable uncertainty into their strict reality. The rigid, highly structured systems of the Adeptus Terra were completely incapable of processing such an impossible, logic-defying event occurring right within their heavily fortified domain. Slowly, the mechanical humming began to safely subside, and the interlocking metallic rings ceased their rapid, chaotic rotation in the air. The harsh, sterile white light faded into nothingness, leaving behind only an oppressive, suffocating darkness, and a profound sense of lingering, inescapable doom that permeated the ship. The relic suddenly dropped heavily to the deck plates with a loud metallic clang, instantly reverting into a completely inert, lifeless state. The immediate localized temperature slowly began to normalize, but the deep, psychological chill remained permanently lodged within the terrified hearts of every single mortal witness present. The Sister of Silence carefully approached the dormant object, her expression remaining entirely obscured behind the heavy, emotionless rebreather mask. She stared down at the strange metallic rings, surely contemplating the terrifying implications of a force that could effortlessly bypass the ultimate, divine protection of the Golden Throne. This terrifying encounter left a permanent, unhealable scar upon the unyielding spirit of the entire surviving Anathema Psykana strike force. They had boldly stared into a new, highly dangerous abyss, one that did not flinch or dissolve when confronted by their absolute, terrifying aura of complete emptiness. The grand, sweeping crusade of the Imperium is merely a fragile, flickering candle attempting to illuminate a vast, endlessly expanding void. We arrogantly believe our blessed weapons and rigid doctrines can conquer the stars, yet we are constantly reminded of our absolute, pathetic insignificance in the grand cosmic scheme. The Sisters of Silence silently secured the dormant artifact, wrapping it tightly in heavy, lead-lined containment chains for immediate extraction. They moved with their usual, highly practiced efficiency, but the atmosphere was noticeably heavier, burdened by the unspoken grim knowledge of their own potential, horrifying limitations. The black ship resumed its treacherous, perilous journey through the hostile Immaterium, its ancient gellar fields fully restored to maximum operational capacity. However, the true damage had already been permanently inflicted, not upon the heavy adamantium hull, but upon the fundamental, unyielding faith of those witnessing the impossible. As the oppressive silence returned to the darkened corridors, it was no longer a comforting shield against the chaotic madness outside. It was now a terrifying, suffocating reminder of the vast, uncaring emptiness of the universe. A silent tomb completely indifferent to the desperate, unending struggles of humanity. The final containment protocols were executed with chilling precision, heavily securing the impossible dormant relic deep within the most heavily armored, lead-lined stasis vaults. The surviving Oblivion Knights resumed their silent patrols, walking the darkened, entirely bloodless corridors like phantoms, their heavy boots making zero sound against the iron. Their magnificent copper armor, previously gleaming with immaculate holy purpose, remained permanently scorched by the inexplicable sterile white energies of the mysterious ringed artifact. It served as a grim, ever-present reminder that the vast, uncaring galaxy holds terrifying secrets entirely immune to the Emperor's ultimate, soulless biological sanctions. Slowly, I pull myself entirely back from the fragmented, horrific memories etched so deeply within these ancient, crumbling vellum records I hold before me. The suffocating, heavy air of the underground sanctum of oaths presses inward, intensely scented with the pungent, intoxicating aroma of slowly burning myrrh incense. My frail, heavily ink-stained fingers tremble slightly as I carefully roll the heavy, metallic-edged scroll, sealing the terrible, highly classified truth away from vulnerability. The flickering, golden light of the massive wax candle casts long, dancing shadows across the towering, seemingly endless rows of heavily guarded, forbidden archives. I am nothing but a humble, insignificant scholar, a fragile mortal, trapped beneath the immense, crushing weight of 10 millennia of unending, brutal warfare. Yet, reading these accounts forces a profound, highly uncomfortable realization upon my tired mind regarding the true, horrific nature of our grand imperial survival. We blindly worship the radiant, glorious light of the golden throne, completely ignoring the absolute, terrifying darkness strictly required to sustain that very illumination. The Anathema Psykana are the absolute embodiment of that necessary darkness, a tragic sisterhood forced to bear the ultimate, crushing burden of absolute isolation. Consider the profound, staggering tragedy of their grim existence. They flawlessly protect a sprawling, ungrateful empire that instinctively shudders in absolute disgust at them. They are biological pariahs, completely severed from the warm, chaotic sea of souls, forced to navigate the material universe within a suffocating, impenetrable void. They will never know the comforting warmth of true fellowship, the uplifting resonance of shared faith, or the gentle touch of a loving hand. Their entire grim reality is defined solely by the cold, mechanical application of necessary violence, ruthlessly silencing rogue psychers to prevent catastrophic, systemic collapse. The colossal black ships will constantly continue their endless, terrifying voyages across the treacherous warp currents, heavily laden with the miserable tithe of mutants. And the Sisters of Silence will forever stand guard over these floating purgatories, strictly ensuring the dangerous cargo reaches Holy Terra without a single failure. It is an utterly thankless, eternally exhausting crusade, completely devoid of the glorious, celebrated triumphs associated with the mighty, transhuman, Adeptus Astartes Space Marines. There will be absolutely no majestic statues carved in their honor, no soaring, triumphant hymns composed to celebrate their countless, unrecorded, and silent victories. Their only true reward is the cold, grim satisfaction of a dangerous duty flawlessly executed, meticulously maintaining the fragile, highly unstable boundaries of reality. They are the ultimate, uncompromising wardens of the material plane, violently rejecting the chaotic, impossible manifestations of the Immaterium with their very soulless existence. But what happens when they encounter a threat that completely ignores their terrifying null fields, like the ancient mechanical anomaly recovered aboard the vessel? This terrifying question constantly haunts my waking hours, a persistent, chilling whisper suggesting that our ultimate defensive mechanisms are fundamentally flawed and tragically incomplete. The universe is vastly older, significantly colder, and infinitely more hostile than our rigid, highly dogmatic imperial theology could ever possibly begin to comprehend. We are merely insignificant, highly vulnerable trespassers stumbling blindly through the dark, ancient ruins of forgotten, supremely powerful cosmic entities beyond our meager understanding. The Silent Sisterhood represents the absolute pinnacle of the Emperor's brilliant, yet entirely ruthless design, weaponizing the deepest biological anomalies to serve human survival. Yet, even his boundless intellect could not possibly predict every single technological or spectral horror slumbering silently within the deepest uncharted abysses of space. We must quietly acknowledge the severe psychological toll exacted upon these voiceless women, heavily burdened with the grim task of policing the volatile mind. They witness the absolute worst of human corruption and chaotic possession daily, yet they remain entirely unable to voice their own immense internal suffering. Their vow of tranquility is not merely a symbolic gesture of absolute devotion. It is a vital, tactical necessity to maintain their crushing focus. Spoken words are inherently flawed, easily corrupted by the deceitful nature of the warp, whereas absolute silence remains perfectly pure, entirely immune to chaotic manipulation. Every perfectly executed strike of their executioner great blades is a testament to their unwavering discipline, a brutal, highly efficient mechanism of divine imperial retribution. They do not fight with burning, righteous fury or passionate hatred. They operate with the chilling, calculating detachment of a highly advanced logic engine. I trace the faded Imperial Aquila embossed deeply into the heavy leather cover of the adjacent tome, contemplating the immense fragility of our empire. Without the constant, silent vigilance of the Oblivion Knights, the sheer volume of rogue psychers would instantly tear the fabric of reality entirely asunder. The sprawling hive cities would rapidly become localized hellscapes, completely consumed by rampant warp storms and entirely overrun by ravenous, multi-limbed demonic entities. Humanity would be instantly snuffed out, a brief, chaotic candle rapidly extinguished by the overwhelming, suffocating darkness of an entirely uncaring, highly hostile universe. Therefore, we must deeply revere the profound silence they bring, recognizing it not as an oppressive curse, but as the ultimate, necessary protective shield. It is the grim, absolute quiet that precedes the total annihilation of our most dangerous enemies, the glorious sound of the Emperor's perfect justice. The intricate, thought-mark language they utilize is a beautiful, deadly dance of armored fingers, conveying complex tactical doctrines with absolute, highly precise visual clarity. It is a strictly private lexicon, completely incomprehensible to the uninitiated, further isolating them from the very humanity they are sworn to flawlessly protect. As the heavy shadows lengthen aggressively across the scriptorium floor, I feel a deep, pervasive chill settling permanently into my old, fragile mortal bones. The ancient secrets I have actively uncovered today will remain heavily guarded, buried deep beneath layers of strict bureaucratic encryption and lethal security protocols. Only a select few are permitted to truly comprehend the sheer scale of the silent war being waged constantly in the terrifying, unseen dimensions. To reveal the absolute truth to the ignorant masses would invite widespread, uncontrollable panic, completely destabilizing the already fragile, heavily fractured planetary defense systems. The Anathema. Psykana seek absolutely no validation from the weak, fearful citizens of the vast Imperium. Their ultimate loyalty belongs strictly to the throne. They are the terrifying ghosts of the Imperial tithe, ensuring the psychic lifeblood flows completely uninterrupted to sustain the Emperor's guiding, brilliant astropathic light. As I gently extinguish the flickering candle, the absolute, suffocating darkness of the underground library instantly reclaims the narrow, claustrophobic space surrounding my desk. The silence here is profound, yet it pales in comparison to the absolute, terrifying void projected by the magnificent, copper-clad warriors of the Sisterhood. Their silent vigil remains the only true barrier, standing between humanity and the insatiable slavering horrors lurking just beneath the thin veneer of reality. We must quietly honor their tragic, unsung sacrifices, for without their absolute, soulless dedication, the entire galaxy would rapidly descend into permanent, chaotic ruin. Let us never forget the chilling, heavy price of our continued survival in this grim, unforgiving universe, paid in the currency of absolute isolation. The Anathema Psykana stand resolute, a flawless, impenetrable shield of absolute nothingness, forever guarding the Emperor's divine realm from the maddening, creeping shadows forever. May their heavy, copper armor never truly break, and may their heavy executioner great blades remain eternally sharp against the endless, encroaching tides of madness. We owe our very existence to the ones we instinctively fear, a cruel, ironic paradox that perfectly defines the brutal, uncompromising reality of our time. The heavy iron doors of the scriptorium groan loudly as they automatically seal shut, locking these forbidden, terrifying truths away for another grueling century. The grimdark reality of the 41st millennium grinds forward relentlessly, an uncaring, brutal machine fueled by the silent, unacknowledged sacrifices of the truly damned. I gather my remaining strength to walk the long, winding path back toward my meager, highly uncomfortable living quarters. Every single footstep echoes loudly within the completely abandoned, freezing corridors, serving as a constant, heavy reminder of the immense, crushing isolation we all must patiently bear. As the absolute darkness finally swallows the last flickering remnants of my artificial light, I offer one final, desperate prayer into the cold, uncaring, and absolutely silent void surrounding us all. May the golden throne endure this eternal night. Imperator Gloria in excelsis terra. The sacred records are now permanently sealed, but our dark journey through the vast, unforgiving lore of the 41st millennium has only just begun. Please remember to politely like this video, share these forbidden truths, and carefully subscribe to our channel.